which is always a rather interesting topic and sometimes a bit sensitive. So tonight, Alex Lunstra of AL Art and Prints is going to join me in presenting the topic. And we have a great collaboration going on tonight. So I'd like to introduce Andrew Reinhardt of Art South Dakota, who is going to say a few words as well.
Hi, well, thanks so much, Claudia. I'm so happy that we could be here today. So Art South Dakota is your statewide arts service organization. We serve artists and arts organizations across the state. And it's our distinct pleasure to get to collaborate again with the Watering Can on this session. We're broadcasting out live to a statewide audience via Zoom, who are going to be participating in breakouts and conversations, and we'll be bringing some of their questions and answers in. And for the Zoom audience, just so you know, there will be a good opportunity for you all to meet with each other. During the introductions here, Alex will jump on and get to meet you and talk to you, and then we'll have some breakout sessions partway through tonight as well. And greetings to everyone in the room. We have a few materials from Art South Dakota on the back table. If you're not familiar with us, one of the main things that we do that would be of interest to you first and foremost is a weekly arts news email that we send out across the state. I think many of you are probably on it. But in addition to arts events, we have arts opportunities, including calls for arts, grants that are available. We really try to be kind of the mouthpiece for the arts across the state to help you know what's going on and what opportunities there are. So if you have any questions after the session tonight, please come up and feel free to talk to any of us. My colleague Amanda Levesque just joined us in the back there, and then also our executive director Jim Spears is on a phone call, but he's wandering the halls and will be back shortly. So thank you all for being here tonight, and for the Zoom audience, if there are any technical issues, please send it to me in the chat and we'll make sure to help you out. Thanks so much.
Super. Thanks, Andrew. Well, I think this is a great opportunity for these two organizations to come together and bring more information on the business side to artists in our state. So we do like to start out with introductions, and this is going to be an interesting one because we have two audiences. We have an online audience as well as our audience that are here with us. So Alex is going to join those of you who are online. What we like to do is to make this a bit brief because we don't have all night. We'd like to get into our topic. But we'd like you to give your name, maybe just a short bit about your art. And then I have a question each month. And so this month I put together Fall is Upon Us. Before we know it, it will be winter. The holidays are around the corner. And then it's going to be New Year's. So I'm curious about resolutions. Are you a person that sets resolutions? And do you keep them if you are? So that will be our question. Now we're back together. Okay. And we are working through the toolkit. Do you have yours handy, or mine is right there? Could you hold it up? For those of you who are not familiar with it, Springboard for the Arts, which is in St. Paul, has put this together. This is their second version. It is available as a PDF download online, and we did send out that link or put it out on Instagram and Facebook so that you can take a look at it. It's a full process for business, kind of business side of the arts. So feel free to download it. I'll caution you, it's over 200 pages, so before you hit print, think twice. You can order it already printed and bound if you would like to as well. So we have decided to take some of the components of their toolkit and use them in our own sessions here. So tonight's version of pricing is kind of a compilation of what we have learned coming from the business world, coming from the art world, and their information as well. So we did also post a link to the PDFs that we're going to be handing out tonight. So for those of you who are not with us in person, those PDFs or prints are available to you. And I do like to make sure to acknowledge different people and organizations that have made this possible. One is we are fiscally sponsored by the Sioux Falls Arts Council. We've had funding through a very generous donor. We have a grant from the Sioux Falls Community Area Foundation, and Rayfeld's Modern is our host. We do pay a nominal amount, but certainly not near what this room would go for if we were a for-profit organization. So we appreciate their support as well. So I'd like to mention too, for those who are here, we understand that it's one thing to sit in this room, to hear these concepts that we present, and then oftentimes go home and go, oh, wow, what was it they said? Or how do I apply this? How does this fit for my business? So one of the things we started with this session, with this series, is to meet a second time during the month. So we will be meeting next Monday, which is the 18th, at the library here downtown. And this is an open session. We've had people come who have not been to the session itself, but maybe have watched it on Facebook Live. So come down and we can dig in a little deeper to the topic of pricing, answer some questions, and help to learn how this fits for your business model. So tonight, we have quite a bit to cover, everything from basics of break-even points, calculating business costs, the psychological aspects of pricing, and using comparison for pricing as well as incentives. So Alex, again with AL Art and Prints, Alex is an artist and also an entrepreneur. Her business is multifaceted and has expanded beyond painting and her prints. She will start with basics of break-even points.
Thanks, Claudia. Appreciate that. So for starting off with break-even points, do you want to hand out the income goals sheet? So like she said, we've got the links online for access to these documents if you want to look at them yourselves. They're kind of nice visual aids to go along with things. And we're talking about some, I don't know, I want to say touchy artist subjects. I like seeing them. It's a little easier than just hearing them and hoping to remember. So before we dive into pricing our products, we really want to make sure and take a step back and consider our goals with our art businesses. So like, do you want to shoot for being an artist full-time? Or do you want to do it part-time? Do you want to supplement things with a full-time job or a part-time job? I create my best work when I'm at kind of an even split. I do about half of my work from art-related business, and half of it is paid by the pizza shop, so. So that keeps me at a little happier medium, and I create a lot better. So you guys have to figure out what works best for you and your creative cycle, I guess we'll call it. So I want to give everybody that handout just as a reminder and a visual aid for setting your income goals, because I know those can be really daunting. Regardless of your goals with your business, if you just want to sell a few pieces here and there, or if you want to push it left and right, you need to make sure that your pricing is at least at your break-even point. We're not out here putting all of our hearts and souls into work and then selling it to lose money. At least, hopefully not. You shouldn't do that for very long, if anything. So even if you are trying to move old inventory and make room for new things, keep an eye out and count all your costs. Make sure you're not losing your money or that investment that you put into those things initially. So that handout gives you a little equation, and that's kind of a good way to break this down and see all of the individual costs into it. If we do a painting, yeah, we know there's a canvas, there's paints, there's brushes involved, but there's a lot more to it. If you rent a space, or even if you're just using a portion of your home for it, there's that involved as well. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on your break-even point, but also keep track of what you're charging compared to other artists. You don't want to be charging too little and confusing your buyers. If you have a product here that's perfectly fine, but maybe old year's or last year's print, and then you're charging way less than your neighbor over here who put the same amount of money into their print and same amount of time, all that, that can kind of confuse our buyers when we're already working in kind of a confusing market. So I want to make sure to keep in mind it's tough as artists and business owners to wrap our heads around all the costs behind a piece of artwork, let alone for our customers. So underpricing things can really hurt you and everybody else around you. So keep an eye out for that. Use that little sheet, find out what your break-even point is, and don't go below that. So I know Claudia mentioned a handout for some common business and personal expenses. Is that something we can send in a link? That was already posted. Okay, perfect. So there was one piece that was already posted with just a whole list of common business and personal expenses that you want to make sure you're keeping track of. Those are really daunting and kind of boring. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of it right now, but look up the sheet and make a little file folder. Keep track of all of your receipts and all those expenses. If it's things like mileage for your vehicle, whether you're buying supplies or going to teach a class or coming to something like this, you can use different apps on your phone to track that and make it a little easier. And that makes things at tax time a little more slick and not so daunting and overwhelming. So now that you've been thinking about all of the expenses and things that go into it, think about your goal. Like I said, I like to split my income about 50-50. That seems to be my happy medium. I'd like to create all the time, but that's not realistic. When I do that, my work doesn't turn out very good. So think about setting just a monthly goal. Now, I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but throw a number out there. If you guys start with a goal of making $1,000 gross each month from your art sales, whether that's classes or paintings, or maybe you're selling stuff at vending events, keep an eye out, and when you hit that goal, you can work on increasing it a little bit. Maybe just flip it to $1,000 net income. And when I mean the gross and net, I don't know if I lost anybody on that part. So your gross income is if you sell a book for $25 and you get that $25 all back. Your net income is everything that you get after you pay your taxes, after you pay for the supplies. This book costs something to print. Even if you print it yourself, you're still putting money into the materials. So there's a few ways that you can look at your goals and also flip them around easily to keep increasing those goals as you move along. Another thing that I like to do is not only looking at what's my monthly income goal, is I take a look at what's a realistic goal. It's nice to say, oh, I'd like to make $1,000 every month. It's good to put it out in the universe and try to manifest that, but realistically, what can you make? So I started breaking things down right away and giving myself an annual list of my income. Now that started as just a couple of like sales of greeting cards to coworkers and my first show at the Art Collective. And now that expands different things. I've got wholesale orders with small businesses in town, and I do guided painting classes also. So as you keep expanding that, you can kind of keep adding to your list and seeing, okay, I think I can make X amount off of this and X amount off of this. And after a while, you'll kind of see a little average. Now that you've got both of those sides, you've got your what I want in life goal, and then what's my realistic goal, what I think I can hit. Try to find a happy medium between that. This goal setting is really important. I don't want you to get down on yourselves about things because you set something too high though. So being realistic and looking at it from multiple angles can be really helpful. And I do want to make sure and bring up, like Claudia talked about the setting New Year's resolutions, putting goals down on paper can be really helpful. Even if you're not hitting them, it's out there and it's something you're looking at and keeping in mind for next time. And we'll look a little more at calculating business costs with Claudia then.
Thanks. Could you pass these out? So I don't want to intimidate you, but this is a 4-page handout. It's 2 pages both sides. And I think for many people who are not business people, when you start talking about let's calculate our costs, it is a bit intimidating. It's like, where do I even begin? So I think that this worksheet is excellent. And for those of you who are online, again, the link was sent out. It has been posted on our Facebook page, on our Instagram page. Art South Dakota did send it out as well. So do take a look at this. They have broken it down to be about as simple as you can get. I'm not going to say that it's a simple process, but let's take it through the steps. Now, Alex talked about, how much do you want to make? So if you're looking at you want to make $1,000 in a month's time, what we need to do then is to take this down to what is that hourly, because we'd like to work with that number, because then we can start applying that to the amount of time that you're putting into a particular piece. So you can simply do the math. There's various ways to break it down, but you can just divide it by 160, which would be 4 weeks of 40 hours, and come up with a number. And that would be your labor cost. So now you know hourly how much you want to earn, and you should be earning for each particular piece to make that $1,000. Material, and again, this is everything that goes into that piece. And I understand on both of these, hourly and labor as well as materials, it has to be challenging as an artist, because not many artists that I'm familiar with, because so many are part-time artists and have other commitments. So instead of being able to say, oh, I put in 8 hours today and know that, okay, this is how much time I put in, you're putting in bits and pieces over a period of time. And as Alex and I were talking about this, she said she had tried to actually track how much time she was putting into a piece, and then just threw her hands up at some point, because it is difficult. You might get 20 minutes here, you might get 2 hours there, but you do need to try to ballpark it. This piece took me longer than usual. This piece took me less. I really think that I put in 4 hours of work on this piece. So somehow you need to get your arms around an average per piece, or an average, or at least an amount per individual piece. Material-wise, again, we come down to, if you're using a tube of paint, how do you differentiate that? And maybe you can look at it as, I, on the average, buy a tube a year of blue paint. So can you see now, okay, I can start accounting for that in that way. And again, depending upon what you're using for your artwork. Again, do your best to estimate what is going in or what you're using, even on that monthly basis. Because again, if we can break it down to hourly, if you can get it down to monthly, you can start breaking it down. How many pieces did you create in that month? Then we're going to come down to overhead. And this is where it starts getting a little murky, because how do I attribute everything that is not in my actual art piece? The heat in the environment that you're in, whether you have a studio or you're using a bedroom in your home, it just goes on forever as to the indirect things that are should be accounted for in your work. And then we get down to profit. And again, this is something that I think scares a lot of artists because you should be making a profit. It shouldn't just be taking care of your, okay, well, I made about so much on this. You should be able to break it down to how much went into materials, about how much time did you spend on this. So you have an idea of those. We'll get to the point so that you can figure out your overhead. And then profit will come down to be an actual percentage. And you should apply that percentage to each piece of work before you put the final price on it to make sure that you are making money and not giving away what you're producing. So any questions or any concerns at this point? Okay, so I haven't lost anybody too deeply so far. Calculating the cost of production, and this is, overhead is expressed as a percentage, and it's dividing indirect costs by direct costs, or the overhead in production is. So indirect costs, and this is where Alex mentioned something that I had posted a link to, and I brought it with. I wanted to read some of these to you. These are items that artists could potentially deduct on your taxes. So you can look at many of these. Some of these are direct costs, but some of them are indirect. Printing. Now, for James, because he's doing books, that's a direct cost because you wouldn't have a book without it. But for others, you're printing invoices, you might be printing marketing material. Can you see how that doesn't go into your product, your art piece? So you do need to attribute or account for that. Software, apps that you use. If you use Microsoft, that's a pay for product. Your website, if you have a website, if you're using Square, also your domain, and you have to have that as an annual expense. Your hosting is also an annual expense. If you're using a laptop, because again, you may not be, if you're creating paintings, but still, how are you doing your accounting? You're probably doing it on a laptop. So a certain portion of use of that laptop could be attributed to your indirect costs or overhead. Legal services. If you're doing a contract, say you're doing a commission with someone, you want to make sure that that contract is legitimate. Or if somebody presents you with a contract for a project, you again want to make sure that you're not getting yourself in trouble. So you may need to seek out legal advice. Journals, magazines, again, if those are helpful to you in creating your work, keep track of those because those can be used for taxes as well as indirect costs. Juried exhibition shows, any type of art show when you have to pay a fee to enter to have your space. Continuing education classes. Now, Julie Dent was not able to join us tonight. Julie is a great one for taking continuing education, and she's forever going off learning fabulous things and applying it to her work. So there again, you can count that. Mileage to a certain degree. Now, that may not be a high amount for you, so you have to debate, is it worth it to track this, or is it something that I'm just not going to bother with? If you have a home office or a studio where you're working, you can use that square footage, again, as part of your overhead, as well as when you do your taxes. If you have filing assistants, and I would suggest that at least the first year you find somebody, and we should as a resource for the group, if you know somebody who works in the art field as a specialty for taxes, we should post that now that we're getting close to tax season. So please share that information. But you should tap into somebody like that at least 1 year so that you can get that feedback as to, yes, this is something you should track and you can deduct. This is something that may not be worth it for you. So all of those things, again, indirect costs. So I wanted you to see that it is a pretty good sized list, and that's not necessarily everything. So now, to be able to come out with overhead, we take your indirect costs, and again, this is going to take a little bit, but because we're coming to tax season, you're going to be counting, adding this up so you'll know what it is for the year. And then we divide it by your direct costs, and those are the things that go directly into your piece of work. And that's where you come up with overhead. Move the decimal point over by 2 or multiply by 100, and you'll come up with a percentage. So have I muddied the waters more, or are we somewhat clear on figuring out the overhead cost of your work? So one of the things here is an assignment, homework assignment, and calculate your overhead percentage, and then in the following timeframes. Something to keep in mind is that overhead can change seasonally. Again, with the art collective coming up right now, it's going into Christmas, you're probably going to be wanting to have more of certain type of work, so you might be producing in a higher volume than you might otherwise. There might also be higher expenses involved. And it does cost. There's an exercise here about picking 2 of your products and calculate the overhead for each. So going through that exercise of direct, indirect, and then coming up with your overhead. Now from there, to find the overhead percentage, again, start by adding your labor and your materials together, and then multiply by that percentage that we came up with. And then this will walk you through the overhead percentage, applying it by adding your labor hours and cost there, as well as how much the amount of material costs that you have per piece, your overhead percentage, and then multiply by your profit. Now, here they use an example of 15%, and I would hope for you that you can have at least a 15% profit. And you need to look at some of your things. Some may have a higher percentage of profit than others. I'm sure with the various things that you do that you find you make more money in certain areas than in others. So one of the things to bring this home that we wanted to do tonight, I like to go into breakout sessions. I think that it's very helpful to talk amongst ourselves. And I'd like to break out into smaller groups and take about 10 minutes in each of those groups. And the conversation will be around indirect costs that might have surprised you or that you have not really thought of, those things that are a little bit hidden. And so let's see here too, why don't we count off in 3. Okay, we'd like to, we are back together, both groups online and in person. And I'd like now for the designated note taker to give us 2 or 3 of the things from their group. And again, we'll make sure to record these so that you have them. We'll post them for you. So group number 1. Great. Number 1, could you tell us 2 or 3 things from your group?
Yeah, so we talked about some costs. We kind of shared a few more of those. We had like updating your website. One of the big ones we talked about was networking and the hours that takes. And it's like indirect labor, but then you also drum up more business. So like you do get kind of like paid for it, but there are not hours where you're like making something else directly. So that was something we discussed. Another one of those overhead costs that we shared was shipping costs, or researching materials to buy. And then we kind of talked about, what else did we say? Oh, we talked about Dolly Parton not singing with Elvis because she wouldn't compromise because it wasn't up to her standards. So we talked about your work is worth it and staying true. Yes.
Okay. So, and I will pass the mic to the next group, but let me read this first for the people who might not be able to see this. But they were talking about website, was it updating or just websites in general?
I think like I think the cost of the website and also if you build your own website, the hours that it takes to build that and then
Yes.
how it takes to update it and all of that.
Yeah, I sat with this group for a short time and they really did come up with an interesting one between networking, your time updating or doing your website. There is that labor cost that it's not direct, it's indirect. So there's almost like another category that needs to be considered. Networking and the time, again, indirect, and then shipping and materials. And shipping is a big one. I ran into an artist at the UPS store, and this was some time ago, and they were shipping a piece. They were very excited because they had sold it, and they were shipping it, but they didn't include shipping costs. And when they found out how much it was going to be to pack it and ship it, it was almost more than the cost of the piece. So it's something that we really have to be careful about. So group 2.
That would be myself and Arnie and Caitlin. So we discussed some indirect costs. We agreed, like, for art call entry fees, that was a good point being made. Also, internet and phone use, like covering those bills. And then we discussed things like mileage to events such as these, and then also to stores for supplies. And then, can I share what you said about the home studio? About like the,
I don't know if that's
safe
I don't know if
harbor?
that's the right word though for that deduction,
oh, okay.
but
But
yeah,
it's like a safe harbor, right?
I think that's the name for the category, but it comes with an asterisk of I'm not a financial expert.
Yeah, okay. And then we discussed, so if you have a home studio, so then like it would be considered like a safe harbor deduction. And so yeah, we thought all those were really important to consider. So, yeah.
And group 3.
We also talked about gas and mileage. We brought up event fees. So, like paying for a booth at an event. We also talked about office space. And that's about it.
Good deal. Thank you. Well, thank you to the note takers for helping us to make this list. Was this a helpful exercise? Are you kind of getting the difference too between direct and indirect? Okay. Ooh, and now Alex is going to cover psychological, what was it? The psychological aspects of pricing.
And I do have that last handout, because we like our little visual aids. God, I feel cramped up here now. Okay. So the last handout I have going out has some good vocabulary on it. And I know we keep bringing up a lot of big daunting things right now. If you guys want to keep this and look at it later on, it's got a lot of good aspects that you guys want to keep in mind with your pricing. So price points, first off, that is a really important psychological aspect of business. It's how much an item's cost can fluctuate before deterring business or before your customer or buyer notices or thinks it's an extreme increase or decrease, essentially. So what that means is, like a good example is a $2 button. If you want to increase or decrease your cost for that, you're probably going to want to work with smaller increments. I'd say like do 50 cents or less if it's a small item like a $2 button. Now, if you're looking at something different like a $1,000 sculpture, you've got quite a bit more wiggle room there. You can probably even look at tacking on a large display for it for a few hundred extra dollars, just because that $1,000 ticket price for a larger item gives you a lot more to work with for the price points, the psychological aspects of it. So that's important to keep in mind when you want to change your prices at all, or if you just want to compare your prices with your neighbors, other people who have similar work to that. It's also good to keep in mind with offering add-ons. We'll talk more about the add-ons in a moment here. The next little vocab word I've got is perceived value, and that is what a person or a group of people think something should cost, whether they know anything about that at all, really. So a good example of that is we can all probably assume or guess that a pottery class where you go in and get to throw clay on a wheel may cost quite a bit more than a rock coloring class for kids, just based on the materials and probably the time and knowledge involved in that, let alone all the other details that none of the customers really need to know about. So there are a few things that I really want you guys to keep in mind for potentially increasing your perceived value with your products. And this is a good way you can justify higher prices. So these things are listed on your sheet. We've got trendiness, scarcity, nostalgia and symbolism, and the add-ons, like I was bringing up earlier. So trendiness can be kind of a touchy one, but it's a really important one. So watch out for copyright issues and things like that. But connecting your work with popular trends can help increase your value. One example I'm thinking of is any Grateful Dead fans may know their Steely logo. It's the design with the skull. It's really popular, and I see it in a lot of other places. Now, I'm not saying it's not a copyright issue. But like that one, there are Sioux Falls stickers I see scattered all over town with the Steely and the Sioux Falls flag stuck in it. And we've got Orion's Pub, that's a locally owned bar downtown. They've got shirts with that as their logo. It kind of sports what vibe they have in there. But these are all little trends that people see and can associate with. Another thing is, like in Sioux Falls specifically, the statue of David is really popular. I'm kind of bummed I had my sweater with him on it I was going to bring in tonight, but I couldn't find it. But that one, even if you walk around the art collective here in December, you'll probably see at least 3 or 4 different artists with their own version of David, whether it's a photograph or a drawing or something like that. So scarcity is the next piece to add value. And this one, I've got a few local examples. Jason with Serendipity Studio, and then Mike Fleming with Vishnu Bunny or Third Eye Gallery. They've done a really good job with limiting their shows. And what I mean by that is they do month-long gallery shows, and they promote it as such. Everybody knows if you're going to check out the upcoming art exhibit at Serendipity, it's only there for a month. If you want to buy the piece, you should snag it then. Now, they're creating a little bit of scarcity, they're kind of limiting things. They're creating a sense of urgency and giving their customers that extra little push for things. So offering a short run of items can also be helpful. So you can limit time on gallery shows, but as an artist, you could also offer limited runs of prints, or like for James, for example, maybe you only sell your first 5 books that you print off, and you sign those ones. So there's different ways that you can make some of your items a little more limited, a little more valuable to your customers. And nostalgia and symbolism is another really good piece to add value to each of your pieces. By incorporating things that people are attached to emotionally, they're a lot more likely to buy that. All of these art purchases tend to be emotional buys, they're impulse buys. So tying in with that nostalgia is really important. By incorporating things like fireflies has been really popular for me. Everybody's got a firefly story, something that's nostalgic and fun with that. Jason with Serendipity Studio again, if you talk with him about his photography, he's got his squirrel story. He loves sharing his squirrel picture because everybody has a connection to it. So with the nostalgia and symbolism, I want to bring up that location is really important also. Here, Statue of David items tend to work pretty well because, oh, he's a cool Sioux Falls thing. But if you're out at like Glacier National Park, for example, some of those paintings of the landscapes out there will probably do a lot better at the gift shop than they would at a random gallery over here. They're still just as pretty here, but it's a little more pertinent at those locations. And necessary add-ons, that's the last piece that I wanted to really touch base on. This is a really good way to increase your sales without really increasing everything else. And I guess a good way I want to explain that is if you're a restaurant worker at all, you know upselling. I always want you to add on the dessert, add on that extra drink, the refill, whatever little thing it is without actually selling any additional stuff, if that makes sense. So a good art example with that is Allison with Prints and Repeat. She's one who does my fine art prints. And when you go onto her website and you order your prints, right after you click like add to cart or whatever it is, there's a little option that says this pairs well with, and then it's got options to buy packaging for your art prints. So, oh man, I'm getting ready for the art collective. I don't want to make that extra run out to the store or support Amazon and buy it on there. Let me buy some from Allison. She makes it really quick and easy. She also has package deals on her website. So as an artist, if you're looking at your prints, you're not quite sure what to get, there's a whole option where it's here's 5x7s or 8x11s, for example, and then she also tacks on canvas prints and things. So giving people more packages and more ways to purchase your work can also be really helpful. Another way to look at that is like if you do things like greeting cards or stickers, you can lump them together and do packages. It doesn't have to be cases or stands for your artwork. So those are all good ways to either increase your value or hopefully sell a little bit more and make some extra money on it. And the next piece that I really want to talk about is comparisons for pricing. So if you've been to many of these watering cans, I talk a lot about comparing with other artists, with other vendors, other sellers. I tend to look at people who aren't just in art because although I'm a little biased and I tend to do more of my purchases with artists and things, I know I'm also competing with boutiques and whatnot. Real people tend to shop at a lot of places. So for comparisons for pricing, make sure that you're learning from others. That's a good way to run your business. It's also a good way to make sure that you're keeping things in line. You don't want to be undercutting your artist neighbors, maybe not hitting your price points, and then you're throwing the whole system out of whack. So researching online or in person is a really good way to do this. If you want to look online, you can just search different visual artists or people who work in different regions like yours. If you work with fiber arts, if you work with auto detailing, things like that. But the way that I really prefer to do this, because online you can see a good little chunk, but also you don't tend to see what area they're in unless you're going in and shipping it and everything. I want to look at artists from here, not New York City. They're good to look at and research, but that doesn't give me any idea of what my painting will sell for here. So for the in-person pieces, keep an eye out for upcoming art shows. I know we keep talking about the art collective. There's a lot of different little craft vending markets around the area too, or makers markets. Go and walk around, talk to the artists and the makers, look at what they're selling, and keep track of the basic price points. See if one person has stickers that are twice as much as the others. Why is that? And maybe try to take note if they're selling or not. For a lot of us who are out at the art collective selling things, you're gonna see people when they're setting up, and you're gonna see them all exhausted after the 3 days of work when they're tearing things down. You can go around and see maybe some price points didn't work, or maybe some worked really well and maybe they could have increased their prices a little bit. So do some research with what's going on in the area. Do some research online so you get a little broader view and maybe not so, I guess, tunnel vision with everybody right in your area. And also make sure to keep in mind that a lot of pieces affect your pricing. I know I keep saying to compare things, but I'm not going to say, here's your painting and compare it to your neighbors and say, oh my gosh, they doubled it. Mine should totally be worth the exact same thing. Keep in mind all the psychological aspects that we discussed earlier. Is it something nostalgic? Is there something tied in with the area? Is there something that's drawing people to it a little bit more? Or even if it's higher quality. So different things like that can really affect your pricing. And you'll also want to keep an eye out on how that's affecting other people's. What I mean by that is like earrings, for example. That's one that I really look at. If you have higher quality metals for those, you'll have a lot wider variety of buyers. If you lower your quality, you're cutting out a large amount of your customer base because people don't like wearing some metals certain times. But for your painting, for example, a lot of times people aren't going to care if it's that really thick, nice canvas or if it's one of the smaller, cheaper ones. Depends where you're selling things at, but keep an eye out on which pieces of quality are actually important and which actually helps kick into your final price. Now, with that being said, I want to make sure and say keep some notes on things. I buy a lot of artwork and collect a lot of things, but also I keep all my price tags on them because from year to year, everything changes. The artwork also should be increasing in value as you're gaining knowledge and growing your skills. But it's nice to be able to take a look back and see, oh, I bought this painting from so-and-so 2 years ago, and I got it for this price then. Now I bought a piece of their work, and it's for this price. It's just kind of nice to keep track, and it's a good way to compare things without losing that over the years. And then I'm going to pass it off to Claudia for incentives.
Okay, thanks. We're covering a lot of territory tonight. I hope that we're not overwhelming you. Incentives is kind of a fun one. I just want to caution you to be thoughtful and strategic, because incentives isn't just taking your old work or things that you don't think are that great, cutting the price drastically and trying to move them out the door, because it represents you. And other people who have bought your work could hear about what that price was or walk by at a show and go, well, I paid 3 times that. So you need to be careful about incentives or anytime you're going to use some kind of a discount. Something that I like, and I've talked about this before, is to use a giveaway at a show. Now, this can be a print, it can be something simple, it doesn't have to be of high value, but you want to collect contact information for the people who are entering. So as we've talked about, emails are an inexpensive way to stay in touch with people. So if you can get emails from half of the people at a show, you have now increased your market reach by that particular number. So it's an incentive for them because they are entering to possibly get a piece of art. But for you, it's also a good business move in that you are getting their contact information. And there is that point too, like we're coming to the end of the year, and sometimes we want to start fresh. And it could be, take stickers for an example. A lot of artists are using stickers. One, it can have their contact information on it. You know, they might nicely incorporate their website or their Instagram, in it so that people know how to contact them. But say you have a new design for the coming year. So maybe what you decide to do is to put them out 2 for the price of 1, end of year special. And again, it's not a big item, but it is something that you're able to move. You can also do a volume. If you buy 10 stickers, here's the price for that. So you can think about how that kind of a technique can be incorporated with your art. Stickers are a very small item, but if you're going to go to something larger. Now, Jennifer White has been known to just say, come down, everything is 30% off. And for her, it works. Just be very careful about you and your market. She has a very established market. When you're new, that kind of technique may not work as well for you or could backfire. You might want to do something like incorporating a print with an original. So if you buy this original today, you can have your choice of one of these 3 prints. So can you see how that's kind of an add-on in a way, but you're not really discounting in the eyes of the buyer? And again, a raffle. Now this is something, especially if you are going to be at the collective as a vendor, I know that M gives you the little tags that you can use, but you're not actually collecting much information there. You're not getting an email address. So consider making up your own sign-up sheet for that, your little piece, just print the size of a business card and with, the information that you want to collect. Addresses anymore, 70 some cents for a stamp is just not an inexpensive way to contact people. But do make sure that you get at least their email address. So incentives, has anybody, any other ideas that you've seen used or that you've used yourselves? Okay, we're fading. It's almost the end of the evening. And we have covered a lot of ground tonight, just to kind of give a quick overview. Break-even points, calculating business costs, indirect costs, using psychology and comparisons and pricing incentives. So at this point, are there any questions? And we can go back to any of the topics that we've covered. Any comments or anything that you'd like to dig into more deeply? Andrew, is there anything coming through there? No, okay. And again, pricing is kind of a heavy topic, and you now have multiple ways to look at it. So hopefully you can feel more comfortable that even if you can't do one, there's another way that you can another technique you can use for pricing. So don't forget, next Monday, the 18th, 6:30 at the library. And we are in, what do they call it? The conference room? Is that the conference room? Just walk straight in to the back and you're going to see it on your left. It's a great time. Some people have said that they actually enjoy it almost more than here because it's very interactive. We talk and we get to hear each other's ideas, whereas this is a little more about disseminating information. December 10th will be our next session. And for those of you who are on Zoom tonight, do know that we record this on Facebook Live. It's on the Watering Can, which is the Watering Can SF, our Facebook page. Julie Dent, who was not able to make it tonight. Julie is another very multifaceted artist and also has quite a background in business. She is going to be talking about portfolios and the different components of it. And again, there's probably going to be one or two that are going to stand out to you as I need to work on that, like especially your artist statement. Oftentimes we struggle with something about like that. And to come up, we just like to say thank you to Art South Dakota for sharing this. And for those of you who are on Zoom tonight who joined us, we appreciate getting the word out. We work hard to share information about business and to help make it understandable and something that you can apply. Our goal is to help you to be profitable because we want you to continue to enjoy doing your art so we can enjoy appreciating it and that you stay here in South Dakota. So, and thank you for those on Facebook Live. Thank you.